I, Lloyd Erskine Sandiford, being appointed Prime Minister, do swear that I will, to the best of my judgment, at all times when so required, freely give my counsel and advice to the Governor-General.
Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford took the oath of office as Prime Minister of Barbados on the afternoon of Monday, June 1st, 1987, a position he held until the early hours of Wednesday, June 7th, 1994. This is a special tribute to Sir Lloyd. We begin with his childhood friend, the Right Reverend Canon Dr. Rufus Broom, the retired Anglican Bishop of Barbados.
The passing of the Right Honourable Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford is news which we receive with mixed emotions. First, it is only natural that we as a nation should join with family, friends and colleagues in this their time of bereavement, as we all feel diminished by our loss. Secondly, this is also an occasion for celebration, as we thank God for a life of dedication and service. After all, we have seen our country evolve as a nation with a proud reputation for political maturity and an outstanding record in the field of human development. So the comment that Barbados is a country which punches above its weight is no idle boast or casual remark. In many regards, this is due to the vision, dedication, and sacrificial service of persons like Lloyd Erskine Sandiford and others who preceded them. I first met Erskine Sandiford in 1952 when we were students in the fifth form of the newly amalgamated Coleridge and Parry School. That relationship grew as we not only studied together, but as we visited each other's homes, at times riding our bicycles throughout the length and breadth of the northern parishes of St. Lucy, St. Peter, and St. James. We went our several ways after graduation from secondary school, but our relationship was renewed as we resettled in Barbados. While there was no regular interaction between us, apart from participating in some family events, there was mutual respect and admiration as we pursued our individual professions. His presence as Prime Minister of Barbados at the service of my ordination and consecration as Bishop of Barbados was an occasion to recall and reflect upon those early formative years at the Coleridge and Parry School, and indeed to marvel at the progress made both individually and nationally since those days. That relationship was more recently brought into focus when in March of 2020, we were among the first former students of our alma mater to be initiated into the newly established Hall of Fame. In every generation, history seems to produce a special caliber of persons to address issues of great concern to humankind. They might not even be aware of it, but through them and through imperfect institutions, God is exercising his authority and working his purpose out. The year 1937, the year of Erskine Sandiford's birth, was one of the watershed periods for us in Barbados and this region. Even up to the time of our independence in 1966, some of the old attitudes, values, and stereotypes of slavery and the plantation system were still present with us. There was still the struggle for an identity, a character, and a purpose of our own. What our first Prime Minister, the Right Excellent Errol Barrow, referred to as our mirror image. Some of the things which we today take for granted, like pre-secondary and tertiary education, were unknown. In fact, in Barbados prior to 1966, only about 16% of students attended secondary school, and less than 1% received a university education. and this was the highest in the region. It is against this background that we must view the contribution of our departed brother. One word which therefore to my mind encapsulates the approach of Lloyd Erskine Sandiford to the social problems facing Barbados is the word passion. It is a word which carries two related meanings. In everyday speech, we use it to mean consuming interest, dedicated enthusiasm, or concentrated commitment. But the word passion is derived from the Latin word passio, which means suffering. It was Lloyd Erskine Sandiford's passion for changes to the conditions under which people lived, and his determination to make what some regarded as controversial decisions, which led to some of the misunderstanding and criticism which he had to endure. Just think about three of the main issues which were subjects of contention, matters which we today are wondering what was all the fuss about, or asking what we would do without them. I'm here referring to the Barbados Community College, the matter of the salary adjustment, which led to the establishment of the social partnership, and the building of the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Conference Center. Some of the expressions used to describe him were stubborn, strong-willed, obdurate, autocratic, and I will not mention some of the uncharitable and insulting remarks which were made. But he remained resolute because of the strength of his conviction. He was convinced that education was a tool for liberation. He was determined to get it and to share it with others. He was passionate in his devotion to do his part for the upliftment of others, to remove some of the blatant inequalities in society. He confronted his detractors in defense of his alternative vision for Barbados, while rejecting what some today would call alternative facts. Since his passing, I've heard him being described in glowing terms, such as a person of unblemished character, a person of honesty, decency, and humility, all of which I knew more than 70 years ago. Like any sinful human being, he made mistakes, and disagreements came from both sides of the political divide. But would to God that some of these things were said during his lifetime, as should be done regardless of one's political affiliation. What a sad thing it is that we are living in a world where the practice of the virtues of honesty, integrity, and goodness is considered as being old-fashioned and a sign of weakness. I believe that the same passion which drove him to do what he did also influenced his behavior.
Trade unionist and a retired member of Parliament, historian Bobby Morris, joins the discussion at this point as he speaks of the occasion when his admiration for Sir Lloyd started.
I go back to 1963. I was a student at that time, just leaving foundation school, and a group called the Under 40s had started to operate. Now, the Under 40s had a brilliant collection of young Barbadians. Erskine was there. There was also Philip Graves, Asquith Phillips, Dr. Keith Hunt, Dr. Colin Hope, and Colin Reed, who was my teacher at foundation school. Now, all of these fellows were identified with the Democratic Labour Party. Then there was Bernard St. John, Henry Ford, Lindsay Bolden, Nigel Barr, Lester Whitehead, Elliot Motley. They went to the Barbados Labour Party. But at the same time, both Nigel Barrow and Elliot Motley were with one party or the other at another time. They were more mobile in terms of their party alliances and so on. But for a young man, their conversations, very brilliant group of young Barbadian scholars, most of them university graduates and so on. I don't think Barbados had ever had anything like that at all. I don't think they'd ever had a graduate group of persons who were out there talking about political issues. Now, if you look at that date, 1961 was the first time the Democratic Labour Party had won a political victory. And you're also in the period of the Federation of the West Indies, which collapsed in 62. So those were the issues of the day. So for a young man at that time, they caught my interest. This brilliant group of persons espousing a different politics in terms of where their support and representation would have fallen at that time. But at the same time, they were speaking with a passion. And it was also just before independence. So it was that lead-up period where, as a young man, I am coming into the public domain through learning and hearing persons of this excellence being broadcast or going to hear their meetings. And therefore, every one of them made an impact on my young mind at the time. And part of that impact is I want to be like one of those guys. I want to follow them. So that was my first introduction to these young people and so on. I used to do a lot of work with Elambe Motley, the Yoruba House and so on. Frank would come and be quiet and listen to me. And it's only then I took over the staff. I became the president of the staff union, the Barbados Workers Union staff at the Barbados Community College, that I had to come before Frank. And because something had happened that was quite problematic. Mr. Adams, Tom Adams, had been persuaded to do a limited regrading of salaries in the public service. And one of the groups that was negatively impacted was the teachers. And Erskine Sandiford, when he became Prime Minister, one of the first things that he did was an entire regrading of the public service. And on top of that, he had 2 salary increases, year 1, year 2. So you had the regrading, and then you had salary increases that would more be like cost of living increases to make sure you catch up now. The regrading is making sure that you are getting paid according to the value of your job. That's a completely different thing. So all jobs are not regraded, because if you're already in a job that is getting paid what the market says you should get, you don't get any difference. So it's got a whole lot of money. I think the public servants were quite happy about that regrading. But then Sandiford had the problem now that having put out that regrading and that money, the whole price of public salary, wages, etc., then there was the world economic downturn after the Gulf War and so on. And revenues were hard to come by. Government revenues went down. We had pretty good economies in 1989, 1990, etc. Because remember, he would have taken on after the death of Erabara.
Fellow Barbadians, I speak to you at a time when the black blanket of sorrow still enwraps our nation. Errol Walton Barrow, thou art gone, and oh, the heavy change, now thou art gone. Now thou art gone, and never must return. But it is a large recompense for us to know that you triumphed over death. For death is destructive, but your life was constructive in so many ways.
Which would have been, in a sense, a fairly difficult thing because it was like Errol Barson after me, Sandy, and after Sandy, Graves, and after that, any number can play, which might not have been the best thing to do, quite frankly. But sometimes leaders do these things. They exercise their judgment, and that becomes very powerful. So that meant that that played out, and it was not necessarily that the masses of members got together and said, well, this is the person that we want, and this is who will be second, etc. So that played out. And there must have been some animosity, there might have been, in that play out, because people like Dr. Haynes and others felt, well, they had an equal opportunity. They could have been the person that Sir Earl Barr could have highlighted. So that caused some problems. So by that time, of course, I am a member of Parliament from 1986. I took part in an election then where the Democratic Labour Party had been out for a while, but we came back. Erskine was a consummate parliamentarian. He loved Parliament. He loved all the traditions of having a Senate and a House of Assembly, all the things that represented, because he would have done history up to his master's level and so on. And in fact, his thesis was about federation, the Malaysian Federation and so on. So that was strong in his identity and his mind. So I remember in 1989, when we were celebrating the 350th anniversary of Parliament, Queen Elizabeth II came down, and we had a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association conference that brought people from all over the world. Erskine was in his element. He, in 1994, was responsible for the establishment of the Assembly of Caribbean Community Parliamentarians, the ACCP. He piloted that. And what he said was that if you want to build a true CARICOM, single market in the economy, you have to get all of the Caribbean people getting together in an assembly occasionally to discuss the issues of the Caribbean. Now, he knew that you would not be able to go back to federation. That's a different thing altogether. So what he did was to get CARICOM to agree that the integration movement would have this assembly, and at the 10th meeting of the heads of government in Grenada, a ministerial committee was set up to prepare an agreement for the consultation of member states about setting up this assembly. And the committee comprised representatives from Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Trinidad and Tobago. And it was a deliberative body, not a legislative body. It can make laws, but if you're dealing with something that has to do with the entire Caribbean, you come and deliberate it, you will talk about it, and therefore give CARICOM something to understand about how the parliamentarians are thinking about that that deliberation and the kind of ideas that came out of it. And so the first session was held, and all the member states except Suriname and Montserrat took part in that session. And not only representative of government, but also the opposition. The first session was held in Barbados. This was in 1996. At that time, Sandyford was out. And Speaker Ishmael Royd was in the chair. George Banker was the clerk. And that session endorsed the draft of a charter of civil society and gave support for the CARICOM, single market and the economy, and recognized CDIRA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Response Agency, as an associate institution of the community. And the second session of the ACCP was held in Grenada in 1999. The third was held in Belize in 2000. And actually, Erskine Sandiford in 2001 wrote a paper on the Assembly of Caribbean Community Parliamentarians, and it was published in Caribbean Community Beyond Survival, published by Ian Randall Publishers in Kingston, 2001. Now, I thought I would put that in the domain because a lot of people might not have been aware of his role. So that even though he was not in government at the time when it was instituted, he has to be credited as the person who came up with the idea. And I know for a fact that myself and some young people whom Erskine used to work with, he used to work with Chris Sinclair, he used to work with Leroy McLean, he used to work with Junior Alsop, and we had his ear about these things. So when he wanted to draft that body, if he wanted to draw the structure and the bylaws, he would call on us to put in whatever we could to make a reality, and he would then make sure he got it finalized. So that is one of the things I want to put in there, very important. The other thing about Erskine is that he encouraged me, and Frank allowed me to go to CARICOM meetings as a trade unionist, to be able to put my voice at those meetings. And that was long before I became an ambassador to CARICOM. So when I became ambassador to CARICOM, it was a strange thing to me. I used to go to these CARICOM meetings, etc. And I saw how disciplined he was. When we went down with Erskine and we had a meeting coming up tomorrow, the night before that meeting, we had to sit down and plan. And don't leave until the meeting adjourned. And once we had tied up all the decisions that we had to make, then he would adjourn, and we met the next morning. And it's one of those, I remember at one of those meetings, by the time now, Earl Barr had passed, and Erskine came to me and Evelyn Graves and said, let me tell you something. We have work to do at home. We have to go back up, and we have to make sure that David Thompson gets a seat in St. John. We have to go and get the young Dems working. So we left the meeting in St. Lucia with the full idea that we were coming home to go and work, because David was the person who was selected at that time.
Bobby Morris places the crisis of the early 1990s in perspective, and he speaks of its impact on the Sandiford administration and his responses.
Well, it came from the downturn in the world economy, a very serious downturn after the Gulf War, etc. And the Barbados economy ran into serious difficulties. We had two major problems facing it. One was high budget deficits, and the second was high foreign payment deficits. The same issue. It's the same issue that Tom Adams had in his turn at office, and he had to go to the IMF twice, not once. So in Sandiford's going to the IMF, it wasn't something new for Barbados. What was a bit different was the strategies that he adopted in dealing with the difficulty that confronted him. That strategy had some acceptance and some dissent. But as I said, people have to remember, Sandiford had just overburdened the public treasury by a huge regrading exercise and then 2 increases in pay before this downturn came. So the economy was really going quite well until this happened. But now he found himself in serious trouble. So he had to find a way out. And he came to the public servants and he said, I will have to move towards cutting your salaries But he also said that as soon as the economy returned to where it should, he would pay you back. That was the intention, to cut the salaries, put things on a level, and so on, and then pay you back at the right time. And he followed that up by carrying out a survey of the public servants, the majority of whom signed and said, go ahead.
We have returned equilibrium to our balance of payments, which is now in surplus. We have kept our word because we said that the 8% cut would be restored, and we have done that. I tell you, we keep our word. And do you know that there were people who at the start told us we should not have an 8% cut. That is what they told us at the start. And they protested and demonstrated against that. They didn't tell us how we should preserve the exchange rate, but they told us not to do that. And you know, when I was ready to restore the 8% cut, these same people come around telling me, don't restore it. I told you about that Trojan wooden horse, that wooden horse. Because you know what would be the state, the social conditions in Barbados today if I had not restored what I had said I would restore. But I keep faith with the workers of Barbados. I keep faith with the people of Barbados. My word is my bond.
But then a problem developed because a group of trade unionists did not want that solution. What they were proposing instead is that Sandyford would issue bonds that the public servants and whoever else could buy in. And Mr. Sandyford was saying, but that is still a debt I will be incurring because you have to pay back bonds. You have to pay the people for the bonds once they buy it with interest. So he said that was not the solution. Now, the other thing is that the trade unions were saying is that it would be illegal to cut the salary of workers. And they actually took a case, the famous Gladwin King case, to the Privy Council. And the Privy Council said the government was right, that the government had the power and the authority to cut salaries. So here he was doing things that were technically legally right. And all of this was because he intended not to go where the IMF wanted, which was a devaluation. The IMF wanted to humble Barbados into a devaluation because it was able to do that in Jamaica. And after that, Jamaica was in a whole series of devaluations, etc. And Sandyford's money was made up. That's not where we're going at all. So what was the other alternative? The other alternative was now establishing something called a social partnership, which was government, the private sector, and the trade unions getting together and agreeing through mutual agreement that they were going to negotiate in such a way that they would keep down salaries so that we would be paying basically on performance and profitability. If the company provided information and data to show that it was really profitable and that it was productive, then those workers can get a lump sum of money and so on. It was not necessarily folded into the salary. And that, of course, was a temporary thing. And the economy picked back up again, and you can go back to your normal salary increases, etc. And again, it was really a very important thing to happen in Barbados. It had never happened before. There was no social partnership anywhere else in the Caribbean. And that became a tremendous example that he, Comrade Trotman, myself, and others were involved in. You do have the social partnership still meeting. In fact, now we have a minister in charge of the of the social partnership, so it has mutated and gone to a different direction. Another point I want to raise about Erskine Sandiford is that I found he liked to groom young people. I'll call some names that you might know. Chris Sinclair, Junior Alsop, Leroy McLean. All of these are very known. Well, they're not as young as they used to be then, but they're still youthful persons, brilliant young people. But that started when he was teaching at community college. And I believe I've been seeing recently on posts and so on, lots of people who went to school with Erskine Sandiford when he was teaching at community college who still remember how he impacted them. A lot of people who were doing political science and so on came away appreciating him as a person, not just as a teacher, but also as a person. And I think they still speak with love and admiration for what he did then, because he was a personable man. He was a very friendly man and so on. And I think he liked to help people. And I think I saw that. And I remember this group of young people. And I worked with them in certain projects too. And all of them did not stay into politics, because that would not have been any commitment to him that they had to stay and become candidates or whatever. Some of them did, but they had that grounding from him, which I think they all respected at the time. Perhaps I should come to what is the most difficult one, then is the problem of the no confidence vote. I think I should at least share my own views on that. Because I on purpose, I'm not talking about his role in education, etc. Those things are going to be talked about a lot by a lot of people, and I endorse all of that. He really was at the center of establishing our modern education system, Polytechnic, which becomes an institute now, Samuel Jackman Institute, the one with the Parliamentary, community college. You put those together. You know, even when Erskine came up with the Sherburne Center, Erskine was lambasted. When he put the Sherburne Center there is going to be a white elephant, nothing is going to happen with it, etc. One of the first things Erskine did was to hold a conference there that was looking at things like what is it? One of the biggest things in the world is about climate in small states. You know, Kofi Annan came and said at that conference that Barbados is punching above its weight. So I know he used to laugh at these things, the ones who were saying, "Well, what you put that big white elephant there for now? You know, it's too small now." It's too small now. So even if you get a new one, as you should, that's still going to be utilized. So he was way ahead of his time in several things, and he was very understanding that people will criticize. He would laugh off the criticism, because once he was satisfied that he was doing the right thing, that was the important thing for him. So let me move on, as you said, then to the final point we will talk about, and that is the vote of no confidence. It came out of something that was, to me, very hurtful, even now. I think of it as something that was not necessary, but I understand life and I understand politics, especially as a historian, I understand these things very well. Now, the major problems stem from appointment to be made at the Tourism Authority. The law really gave authority to the minister and the board to make the decision. Erskine intervened. And I'll try to explain how I saw it at the time. Erskine believed in trade union principles, always. One trade union principle is promotion from within. If you have someone in your organization whom you consider to have the skills, the requisite skills and the capacity, you promote that person from inside. So there was a young man who had 20 years working at the Tourism Authority. His specialization was marketing. There were some people who said that Tony was not charismatic to lead a position as the person in charge of the Tourism Authority. The ministers chose to go to Baimak, asked them to do an executive search. And they came up with two persons, a man, Hudson Husbands, a very nice man, I knew Hudson very well, and a civil servant called Cecil Miller. Now, I add this because I think it's important. Arthur was the brother of a member of Parliament, Mr. Brathwaite. At least 3 ministers of tourism did not agree to put Mr. Arthur as the person in charge of the Tourism Authority, even though it was clear to them that the Prime Minister felt and invited them to give consideration to that. So that became a kind of constitutional issue. That became a constitutional issue. But I'm saying this, it was a political issue too. It was a huge political issue. Because some prime ministers, they wouldn't dare to question. If the prime minister said this is the person, send down the thing, it will be done. Believe me, that is how prime ministers operate in the Caribbean. But it was Erskine Sandiford. And therefore, some people felt that they could take positions with him that they wouldn't dare with other people. You think they would have dared that with Earl Barr? Think again. Think again. Do you think that anybody on Tom Adams' side would dare that with Tom Adams? If Tom said, this is the person I want to head the tourism board, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen. But he wanted Arthur. He wanted a marketing specialist. As I said, his brother was a member of Parliament, so he felt that he should do that. So, I was very surprised, quite frankly, when those particular persons, those particular ministers, took that stand against the Prime Minister. And I knew something would give. I knew it would lead to serious disruption in the party. But because I believe that was coming at a time when there were already serious fractures, especially from the whole economic situation, etc. And I know that all of us who were wearing 2 hats, the hat of being a workers' representative and the hat of being a parliamentarian, we were under our own pressure in terms of how you can maintain that reality. Now, I make the point, I'm a socialist. I'm a democratic socialist. A democratic socialist sees nothing wrong with representing the workers in the House and representing a party that seems to be for the workers. We have no problem with that at all. Not in Barbados, not in England, anywhere at all. Very, very normal. Very normal. So it was not an issue for us. Once we were sure that the party was for the workers, and we are trade unionists, that was Frank's position. He never had any problem with it, basically, Frank Walker. So that was something that we continued to do. We felt that we could go in there and work for the workers by going into Parliament and making sure that we got the legislation and other things that will represent them, and then in the trade union by negotiating the best types of negotiations for them. So this was part of the issue. Now, here's the crisis now. Frank Walker becomes ill. Frank Walker has to retire. And Leroy Trotman, therefore, becomes the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers' Union. So you have three trade unions involved in this now in terms of the Democratic Labour Party and the Barbados Workers' Union, because what Leroy did was to resign from the Democratic Labour Party. So that eased his hand then. He could say that he is going to work as a trade unionist. Evelyn kept his membership, but he was disputing with his Prime Minister. He was still on the staff of the Barbados Workers' Union, but he was on leave to be a minister. And I was on staff, and I was a paid member, and still working, doing the two things that I felt I should be able to do. And then we had to decide in that vote of no confidence whom we would vote for. Trotman voted against Sandyford, of course. Evelyn voted against Sandyford. I voted for him. And up to now, I have never looked back at my decision. Because I believe he was sound and I believe he was right too. If you're a Prime Minister, you have overall responsibility for your cabinet and for the country. And you're going to be brought down on the question of an appointment on a board. There has to be more than the better. It didn't make sense to me. Nobody who was thinking seriously could think that that would cause the bringing down of a government and a Prime Minister. It has to be more than that. You just have to be intellectually strong enough to understand that there were undercurrents playing, other things playing out. And one of those things that was playing out very clearly to me, the activity of what became known as C2SAB, Congress of Trade Unions and Association of Barbados, became an opposition stronghold, basically. There's a lady who is nowhere in Barbados now, left a long time ago. But if you young people, you will know that name. If you saw the role that Dr. Dev played in those marches and all those sorts of things. Because let me say this to you, this is a fact. The NUPW, which is the Public Service Union, not the BWU, basically. We had membership, yes, but the NUPW. They called out their workers on a march, and they did too. They never got past 350 people. Marched through Bridgetown, Trafalgar Square, went back out to NUPW, couldn't bring out any more. We went to our executive council and made the decision that we would do a march also. And clearly that march would be the march of public sector workers that we represented. But when I came down the following day, I saw tons of people over there. And I saw cars. And you have to read Harold Hoyt's Eyewitness to Order and Disorder to understand what went down. We are going to give permission to all of our workers to march. We are going to give permission. That is in print. It's nothing I said, that is in a book. We are going to give all of our workers permission to march. So when you hear about 20,000, I think that's an exaggeration, but that is what happens sometimes. There were lots of people marching then in Barbados. It was really a political march. That is what it was. And it was very impactful. It sent a signal that something is not right in Barbados. And that meant, of course, that after those incidents, it meant that the next election, which was due constitutionally in 1996, had to be looked at. Now, in 1991, before the worst parts of the economic recession and all the conflict hit, Sanford had an election. The economy had done fairly well, 1990 and 1991. Two persons increased their numbers in the elections, Sandiford and Robert Morris. Our numbers went up. Two persons had their numbers going up. So Sandiford was not unpopular. He had his popularity still. And all of the fanfare that was going on then, he must have known that this would pull down the popularity of himself and his party. So the question was now, with this vote that had to occur in 1994, 2 years before the election is due, what will be the outcome? It so happened that the absolute number required for the Barbados Labour Party to say that they won the vote was not achieved because one man did not turn up to vote. His name is history, but it's not me to put it in here, but he did not turn up to vote. And he gave the reason why he didn't turn up to vote. And I'm going to say this now. Sandiford met with all of us. And I don't know if this is ever on any public domain, I'm putting it in now. And he said, we have 2 more years given to us by the people to manage Barbados. But I'm very clear of what happened at the time of the vote of no confidence. You don't have confidence in me to lead the party. So, technically, I believe one could say this, he was meeting now with all the parliamentarians. And technically, one can ask a question whether what he was doing should be done with parliamentarians or whether he should have gone to the party as a whole or the council. But he decided to meet with the parliamentarians. And he said to us, if you can agree on the one party, one person in the grouping here that I can hand over to, I will go to the Governor General and let the Governor General know that I am handing over to that person, who will then have 2 years more to complete the term of office. I was there, and we had discussions. 2 names came forward, and we could not agree. We met a couple of times. So Erskine said, I will advise the Governor General to issue writs for another election. Now again, this is my own thinking. But I believe that agreement could have been reached in terms of that person that's not difficult to hand it over to. But I asked questions. What would be Sandiford's position? All right? From whoever the names of the people who were put up there. And some people were saying, you can't ask us that. He said, I'm not satisfied. Sandiford had put out some ministers, put in new ones. What would happen? You can't ask that. I said, yes, I can. You don't have to answer. But I can, yes. I have my democratic right to ask that, because it's my future you're dealing with. And you don't own my future. You don't own the future of Barbados. You don't own the future of the workers. The only future you own is your own. It's your own. So all of us were making decisions based on how we saw a construction of the future. And at any rate, all it would have guaranteed is that we went from 94 to 96. And then the people would have had a general election to decide what will happen in 96. That's what would be left to the people to decide in 96. Whoever Sandiford said, well, you would all agreed with, that is the person going forward, give that person your loyalty, and we will go down there together. And that did not happen. I think it was a tragedy. But again, when you mature, you realize that life is a dynamic thing, and that changes will occur, and some that you can't plan, because the only body can do that is the Almighty. But Erskine came out of politics. He became our first representative in China, and apparently did a wonderful job.
All that he did was nurtured and undergirded by his deep and abiding faith in God, whose Son was so passionate about what he believed that he suffered and died for the salvation of the world. Every honest task which we undertake, no matter how small or great, should be seen as cooperation with God, sharing with him in the transformation of society. We, like our departed brother, are all stewards of God, to whom we must give an account of our stewardship. Finally, there is a relationship between families which we must never forget.
Thank you very much, Bishop Broom. A tribute to Sir Lloyd as presented by historian and trade unionist Bobby Morris and the retired Anglican Bishop of Barbados, the Right Reverend Canon Dr. Rufus Broom. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Every blessing.